It's Thursday, the 30th of January. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel. We have breaking news on the Coulson C-130 air tanker crash out of New South Wales, Australia, that occurred last week, that killed all 3 crew members on board that aircraft. Today we have the actual footage of the crash taken from the vantage point of either a firefighter or a landowner in the area. We're going to roll this footage. We'll talk about it. Pay particular attention to the winds, the wind velocity, and the wind direction. "20 years ago, in between the military and the airlines, I spent a year training up to be a lead plane pilot for the U.S. Forest Service here in Region 5 in California. And one of the things I remember learning from that training is rule number 1 is you always want to make your drop going downhill. Here in the western states, it's very easy to do that because of the very steep and high terrain. We were always working downhill, and a recovery from a drop generally amounted to a recovery to level flight and then climb out of the canyon area. This drop represents the hazards of dropping in relatively level terrain, and I've got a lot of questions. Investigators are going to have a lot of questions looking at this footage. But all those questions to me add up to an institutional problem with the use of air tankers in Australia. Why were they even dropping in those sort of extreme conditions? So looking at the videotape, investigators got to figure out what was the wind velocity, what was the wind direction at the time. Besides making your drop downhill, you generally want to make your drop into the wind. It appears to me on this videotape that they were dropping with a tailwind. There was quite a bit of a bank after the drop. What were they turning to avoid? Again, it's hard to tell from the perspective of this video what the crew was seeing from the cockpit. Because the aircraft disappears into a column of smoke, they may have been in the clear on the other side of that column of smoke, or they might have been right in a column of smoke obscuring the terrain ahead of them. Regardless, it appears to me there was a bit of a turn immediately after the drop, and then it appears to me that there was a bit of altitude loss after the drop as well. A tailwind and or wind shear in these kind of conditions will result in a loss of altitude. A wind shear event low to the ground, what we train for in the airlines, requires full power and pulling back all the way to the stick shaker, max performing the aircraft in an effort to get away from the ground. We have no idea if this is the case in this particular case. Mechanical malfunctions, investigators will be able to figure that out pretty quickly looking through the wreckage, and the propellers of the C-130 will tell them if all 4 propellers were making enough power, even though the wreckage was severely destroyed and burned on impact. By the way, this video, in my mind, corroborates exactly what the footage of the wreckage on the ground represents: a straight and leveled grind into the ground at a fairly high rate of speed. This also tends to rule out the possibility of structural failure of the airframe prior to impact. Investigators are going to get a lot of information from the lead plane pilot. Did this drop have a lead plane pilot? Typically, the heavy air tankers require a lead plane to lead them in on the drop. The lead plane pilot should have verified that the conditions were safe to drop in. Back to the operational aspect of this. Once you get into a major operation like bushfires in Australia, it's hard to stop or break that ops tempo. Once it's a go, go, go kind of situation, the pressure is pretty extreme on the crews to continue to perform. It takes a lot of chutzpah to raise your hand and say, no, these conditions are unsafe. We need to stop flying in these conditions. Specifically, the surface winds and visibility. and their impact on the effective use of aerial resources while firefighting. So lots more questions from this video footage. If you get more information, post them in the comments section below. Thanks again for your support. We'll see you here.